Okay, so this book kicks off with one simple, powerful truth. Dark psychology isn't fiction, it's real life. Dark psychology isn't something far away in crime dramas or spy stories. Immediately, you feel this isn't some made-up thriller. It's about tactics that anyone might already be using or encountering every day. It's the set of tools and tactics people use, sometimes quietly, sometimes aggressively, to influence your thoughts, feelings, and actions without you even noticing. It's around us every day. Joseph Griffith starts by pointing out that we live in a world of influence. Advertising, politics, personal relationships, they all involve trying to change how someone thinks or behaves. That's normal. But dark psychology takes it a step further. It uses these influence tools unethically, purely for personal gain, and often at someone else's expense. Right after that, he explains why it matters. We all rely on shortcuts in thinking. We trust, we default to patterns, we rely on social cues. That's normal, even helpful. But those same shortcuts are exactly what manipulators exploit to nudge us without our awareness. You may have been on the receiving end without realizing it. You might have even used some of these tactics yourself without knowing their names. The introduction also sets out what the book is going to do. Show you the hidden patterns of manipulation so you can spot them in action. Explain the personalities most likely to use them, people like narcissists, psychopaths, and Machiavellians. Give you defense strategies so you're not caught off guard. Griffith frames the whole book around one big idea. The moment you can see the manipulation happening, it starts to lose its power. Awareness is the first layer of defense. What is dark psychology? When he defines it, he keeps it straightforward. Dark psychology is the study of how people use psychological principles to control, manipulate, and influence others for selfish or harmful purposes. It's not about the good side of persuasion, like convincing your friend to try a new restaurant. It's about the unethical use of psychological principles to get what someone wants, usually at your expense. He keeps it simple. It's the science of influence without consent. It's using human weaknesses, emotional, cognitive, or social, as leverage. It's an umbrella term. Under it you find things like covert persuasion, emotional manipulation, deception and lying, gaslighting, mind control techniques, social influence used unethically. He stresses that anyone can use these tactics, not just bad people in obvious roles. Friends, coworkers, even family can slip into dark psychology behaviors, sometimes without fully realizing the harm they're causing. The reason why makes it dangerous is that it's subtle or invisible. You don't always see it happening, and by the time you do, it may have already shaped your decisions. But if you don't realize it, they can keep steering your thoughts, feelings, and decisions without you ever suspecting it. So, in short, dark psychology equals psychological tools plus unethical intent. It's persuasion stripped of honesty, used to serve the manipulator's goals, not yours. It's the playbook for bending people to your will without them knowing. Dark psychology at present. Dark psychology isn't some far-off idea from spy movies. It's happening right now, all around you. It's in boardrooms, in social media campaigns, in relationships, even in casual conversations. Sometimes it's obvious, like a scam call trying to pressure you into handing over money. But often it's subtle. A coworker who uses guilt to get you to take their shift. A partner who keeps undermining your confidence while insisting they're just being honest. The book makes it clear. This stuff works best when you don't notice it. That's why it's such a threat, and why learning to spot it is such a powerful defense. Dark psychology versus covert emotional manipulation. Here's an important distinction the book draws. Dark psychology is the big umbrella. It's all the ways human psychology can be used to manipulate or control others unethically. Covert emotional manipulation sits under that umbrella. That's when someone specifically targets your feelings, guilt, fear, hope, need for approval, to steer your behavior without you even realizing you're being steered. Think of dark psychology as the full toolbox, and covert emotional manipulation as one particularly sharp, precise tool inside it. The effects of dark psychology. When these tactics hit you, they do more than just change your decisions in the moment. They chip away at you. Emotionally, you might start feeling trapped or drained. Mentally, you start second-guessing yourself. Was I overreacting? Am I imagining this? That's the real danger. You lose trust in your own perceptions. The longer it goes unnoticed, the more control the manipulator has. But, and this is the author's point, the second you recognize the tactic, its power starts to crumble. Concept of empathy. Next, the book talks about empathy because it's one of the main dividing lines between normal persuasion and dark manipulation. Empathy is your ability to understand and share what someone else is feeling. When you have it, you're more likely to treat people with care and fairness. But there's a catch. Empathy can also make you more vulnerable to manipulation because you naturally want to respond to others' needs. If someone lacks empathy, it's a whole different story. They see emotions as weaknesses to exploit. They don't feel bad for causing pain. In fact, they might enjoy the sense of control it gives them. The author makes this crystal clear. Empathy isn't just a nice personality trait. It's what keeps most people from crossing into the dark side of influence. The Dark Triad. Finally, the book introduces the Dark Triad, 3 personality traits that are most linked to manipulative, harmful behavior. 1. Narcissism, big ego, constant need for admiration, and little genuine care for others. 2. Machiavellianism, calculated manipulation, strategic deceit, always working angles to get what they want. 3. Psychopathy, cold, impulsive, lacking empathy or guilt, often charming on the surface but dangerous underneath. Someone can have just one of these traits and still be manipulative. But when all 3 show up in the same person, that's when you're dealing with someone naturally wired to use dark psychology as a primary way of dealing with people. And here's the twist. They're not always obvious villains. They can be leaders, colleagues, even close friends or family members. That's why recognizing the patterns is your first line of defense. What is narcissism? Okay, so let's zoom in on the first point of the Dark Triad, narcissism. In the book, narcissism is described as way more than just vanity. It's not just liking your reflection in the mirror. It's living as if the whole world is a mirror reflecting you. Narcissists have an exaggerated sense of self-importance. They believe they deserve special treatment, no matter the situation. But here's the thing, their self-image is fragile. If they feel criticized, they can react with anger, defensiveness, or even subtle revenge. They crave constant validation, compliments, attention, admiration, because without it, they start feeling empty. And while they can be charming, that charm usually serves their goals, not yours. What is Machiavellianism? Now, Machiavellianism, named after Niccolò Machiavelli, the political thinker who wrote The Prince. If narcissism is about self-importance, Machiavellianism is about strategy. These people are calculated manipulators. They don't just act on impulse. They plan their moves like a chess game, always thinking 3 steps ahead. They're willing to deceive, flatter, or mislead if it gets them what they want. And unlike narcissists, they don't necessarily need constant admiration. They're fine working quietly in the background, pulling strings and letting others take the spotlight, as long as they get the outcome they're aiming for. The book points out that Machiavellianism is one of the most dangerous traits in manipulation because it's patient, deliberate, and often invisible until it's too late. What is psychopathy? Finally, psychopathy, the coldest, most dangerous corner of the Dark Triad. Psychopaths lack empathy and remorse almost entirely. They don't feel bad about hurting people. In fact, they may feel nothing at all. They can be impulsive, thrill-seeking, and even reckless, but they can also be calculated when it suits them. One of the scariest things about psychopathy is their ability to fake emotions. They can smile, charm, and seem warm when it benefits them, but underneath, there's no real connection. The book emphasizes this. Not every psychopath is violent or criminal. Some channel their traits into business, politics, or leadership roles. But in any setting, their emotional detachment and willingness to exploit others make them a high-risk presence in your life. The Dark Triad in action. Up to now, we've just been talking theory, what narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy are. But here's where the book shifts gears into how those traits actually play out in the real world. When the dark triad traits show up in action, it's all about influence without conscience. These people know how to read others, find weak spots, and use them. Sometimes it's blatant, but more often, it's subtle enough to pass as just doing business or just part of the job. The author makes a key point. Not everyone in these professions is manipulative, but these environments give dark triad personalities the perfect stage to shine. Lawyers. In law, persuasion is part of the job. You have to convince judges, juries, or opposing counsel to see things your way. That's normal. But for someone high in the dark triad, the courtroom becomes more than a place for legal argument. It's a chessboard. They'll use emotional manipulation on juries, psychological pressure on witnesses, and sometimes even intimidation behind the scenes. A Machiavellian-minded lawyer might use procedural tricks to stall cases, bury opponents in paperwork, or subtly manipulate language so the truth gets blurred. And because the system itself rewards winning, not empathy, their tactics often go unchecked. Politicians. If you wanted to design the perfect career for the dark triad, politics would be high on the list. Politics is all about influence, image, and persuasion on a mass scale. A narcissistic politician thrives on attention and admiration. A Machiavellian politician builds hidden alliances and backroom deals. And a psychopathic politician? They can make ruthless decisions without losing sleep. Campaign speeches, staged public appearances, and carefully spun narratives aren't just about informing the public. They're often calculated emotional plays. Fear, hope, anger, all used to rally support and silence opposition. The author points out that politics isn't inherently evil, but it's a field where the dark triad skill set can flourish without looking out of place. Salespeople. Sales is another field where dark triad traits can be a major advantage for the seller, not the customer. A narcissistic salesperson might be more focused on hitting their numbers and basking in praise than on solving your problem. A Machiavellian one will study your needs and then spin them in a way that makes you feel like you have to buy, even if it's not in your best interest. And a psychopathic one, they can push deals that harm you without a flicker of guilt. They might use scarcity, only two left, false urgency, this deal ends today, or emotional appeals, this will change your life, to trigger quick decisions before you can think critically. Again, not every salesperson is manipulative, but the environment rewards closing the deal, and dark triad personalities know exactly how to play that game. Sadism. After covering the dark triad, the book takes a moment to talk about another related trait, sadism. Sadism is when someone takes pleasure in another person's suffering. It's not just being cold or indifferent, like a psychopath. It's actually enjoying the fact that they're causing pain, humiliation, or discomfort. In everyday life, sadism can be subtle. It's the boss who deliberately assigns you an impossible task just to watch you fail. It's the friend who mocks you in front of others and laughs at your reaction. But it can also be extreme, in abusive relationships, in bullying, or in outright criminal behavior. The dangerous thing is, sadism can combine with the dark triad traits, making someone both manipulative and actively cruel. A Machiavellian sadist will plan their cruelty for maximum impact. A narcissistic sadist might use humiliation to keep themselves feeling superior. A psychopathic sadist? That's the most volatile mix of all, cold, calculating, and unashamed of the harm they cause. The author's point is clear. While not everyone with dark triad traits is sadistic, when sadism is present, the manipulator's behavior tends to be more openly hostile, more damaging, and often harder to reform. The best techniques of dark psychology and mind manipulation. This is where the book really gets into the nuts and bolts, the specific moves manipulators use. These are the tactics that work in all sorts of settings, from personal relationships to business negotiations. And here's the thing. A lot of these are so common, they don't even look like manipulation at first. But once you know them, you start spotting them everywhere. Once the book introduces the traits of dark personalities, it moves into the real core, the methods they use to influence and control others. This part is almost like a playbook of manipulation, not so you can use it, but so you can recognize it when it's being used on you. Deception through lying. Lying is the most obvious tool in the dark psychology toolbox. It's straightforward. They give you false information so you make decisions based on something that isn't real. But in manipulation, lying isn't always about making up big, elaborate stories. Sometimes it's just small, believable falsehoods sprinkled into conversation to steer your perception. The danger? Lies stack. Once one falsehood is accepted, they can build more on top of it until you're operating in a completely false reality, and by then, it's hard to untangle. Lying is manipulation's oldest trick, and it comes in many forms. A manipulator will tell outright falsehoods, distort the truth, or strategically shape a story so you only see what they want you to see. The classic tool of manipulation here are outright falsehoods, distortions, and carefully shaped half-truths designed to make you see only what benefits them. Lying by omission. This one's sneakier, and honestly, sometimes more powerful than direct lying. Here, the manipulator doesn't tell you something important because they know that missing piece would change your decision. It's like selling you a used car without mentioning that the engine has a major problem. Technically, they didn't lie, but they made sure you didn't have the whole truth. The book calls this one of the most effective manipulative tactics because it's harder to catch and even harder to prove. Sometimes what they don't say is more important than what they do. By leaving out crucial details, they let you form your own, wrong, conclusion, one that benefits them. They leave out critical details, letting you fill in the blanks with your own assumptions, which conveniently align with their goals. Denial. Denial is about outright rejecting reality when confronted, even if the facts are obvious. If you catch them in a lie, they'll insist it never happened. If you present evidence, they'll downplay it, twist it, or claim you misunderstood. This tactic works because it makes you second-guess yourself. If they say it with enough confidence, you might start thinking, wait, maybe I am wrong. This is flat out refusing to acknowledge what happened. Even when caught, they'll insist it didn't occur, planting doubt in your mind about the truth. Even when confronted, they refuse to admit something happened, forcing you to second-guess your memory. Avoidance. Avoidance is the art of dodging questions, changing topics, or creating distractions so the truth never gets addressed. Ask a direct question, they'll pivot to something emotional, make a joke, or suddenly remember an urgent task. It's a way of keeping you from pinning them down without having to lie outright. The conversation gets rerouted before you even realize you didn't get a straight answer. When direct confrontation would expose them, manipulators sidestep it completely, changing the subject, disappearing, or distracting you until the issue fades. When exposure is a risk, they dodge the issue, change topics, distract, or disappear until the moment passes. Generalizations. Generalizations are a way of blurring specifics so you can't challenge them. Instead of saying, I missed work 3 times this week, they'll say, I've been working so hard lately. Or instead of admitting, I forgot your birthday, they'll say, you know I care about you. By painting in broad strokes, they make it hard for you to focus on the exact problem, and that lets them sidestep accountability. By speaking in vague, sweeping statements, they make it harder for you to defend yourself because the claim isn't specific enough to pin down. They make sweeping claims so vague that you can't really argue against them. Playing the victim. This one's classic, and it works because most people are wired to help those in distress. A manipulator will paint themselves as the one who's been wronged, even if they're the one causing the harm. They might exaggerate their struggles, twist events so they look innocent, or bring up old wounds to get sympathy. Once you're feeling sorry for them, you're more likely to let them off the hook, overlook their behavior, or even help them in ways that benefit them at your expense. They flip the script, acting like they're the one being wronged. Your empathy kicks in, you let your guard down, and they get away with whatever they were doing. They flip the narrative so they seem wronged. You stop pressing them because you feel guilty for hurting them. Generate fear. Fear is a powerful motivator, and manipulators know it. They'll introduce a threat, real or imagined, to get you to act the way they want. It could be fear of losing your job, your relationship, your reputation, or even your safety. The more intense the fear, the less time you spend thinking rationally, and that's exactly the state they want you in. Fear makes people act fast and without thinking. Whether it's fear of losing your job, your partner, or your safety, they create a threat so you'll act quickly before you can think critically. They create threats, real or implied, so you react instinctively. Create insecurity. If fear motivates action, insecurity erodes confidence, and both make you easier to control. A manipulator might subtly, or not so subtly, point out your flaws, compare you to others, or plant seeds of doubt about your worth. The goal? To make you feel dependent on their approval. Once they've shaken your self-esteem, you're more likely to defer to them and less likely to challenge their authority. They chip away at your confidence so you feel less sure of yourself and more dependent on them for validation. The door in the face. This is a persuasion trick with a clever setup. First, they make a big, unreasonable request, something you're almost certain to refuse. Then, when you say no, they compromise by asking for something much smaller. That smaller request is what they actually wanted all along, but now it feels more reasonable by comparison. You think you're meeting them halfway, but you've really just walked into their plan. They start with an absurdly large request you're sure to refuse, then follow up with the real, smaller request they wanted all along. By comparison, it feels reasonable, and you're more likely to say yes. Foot in the door. This is the opposite approach. Instead of starting big, they start with a tiny request you're likely to agree to. Once you've said yes, they escalate gradually, each step just a bit bigger than the last. Because you've already agreed before, you feel a psychological pull to stay consistent. So you keep saying yes, even when the requests become significant. The opposite tactic: start small, get a yes, then gradually build up to bigger requests. Once you've said yes once, you're more inclined to keep agreeing. Yes set technique. This one's all about momentum. They'll get you to say yes to a series of small, obvious questions you can't really disagree with. Once you've gotten into the rhythm of agreeing, they slip in the real request, and you're more likely to keep the yes streak going without stopping to think. They ask a series of easy, obvious questions you can't say no to. Once you're in a rhythm of agreeing, they slip in the real request, and you're more likely to accept. Linguistic presupposition. This is a subtle language trick where they phrase something in a way that assumes what they want is already true. Instead of asking, "Would you like to buy this?" they might say, "Would you like to pay with cash or card?" The question presupposes you're buying, and your brain skips over debating that fact. It's sneaky because it bypasses the decision-making process and moves you straight to action. Reverse psychology. This is where the manipulator pretends to want the opposite of what they actually want, knowing you'll resist and do the thing they were aiming for in the first place. It works especially well on people who are naturally independent or resistant to being told what to do. For example, instead of saying, "You should apply for that job," they might say, "You probably wouldn't be interested in that position. It's too demanding." And suddenly, you're thinking, "Oh really? Watch me." They pretend to want the opposite of what they actually want, relying on your resistance to authority to get you to choose their real goal. Negative hidden commands. This is a language-based trick where they tell you not to do something, but the way it's phrased plants the exact idea they want in your mind. For instance, don't think about your ex right now. The very first thing you do is think about them. Skilled manipulators use this to subtly direct your thoughts or feelings without making it obvious. They tell you not to do something, knowing your brain will picture it, which subtly plants the very thought they want. Anchoring. Anchoring comes from behavioral psychology. It's the idea of linking a specific feeling, reaction, or memory to a particular word, gesture, or situation. A manipulator might give you a compliment while touching your shoulder, so over time, that physical gesture alone makes you feel more positive toward them. Or they might bring up bad news every time you mention a certain topic, so you start avoiding that topic entirely. They tie a certain emotional state to a gesture, word, or situation, so they can trigger that state in you later. Blackmail. This is manipulation at its most direct and coercive, using a threat to force you into compliance. It doesn't have to be criminal-level blackmail. It could be emotional. "If you break up with me, I'll tell everyone your secret." Or professional. "If you don't support me on this project, I'll make sure the boss knows about that mistake you made. It works by holding something over your head so you feel trapped into doing what they want. Not just the criminal kind, it can be emotional, too. They hold a secret, threat, or consequence over your head to force compliance. Love bombing. Love bombing is about overwhelming someone with affection, attention, and praise so much so that it feels intoxicating. At first, it feels amazing, like you found your perfect match or best friend. But it's not genuine. Once they've hooked you emotionally, they start using that bond to control you. The withdrawal of that attention becomes painful, so you comply just to get it back. It's especially common in toxic relationships and cult-like groups. They overwhelm you with attention, affection, and praise until you're hooked, then use that emotional bond to control you. Positive reinforcement. This is the flip side of punishment, rewarding the behaviors they want to see so you keep doing them. They might give you praise, gifts, or extra privileges whenever you act in a way that benefits them. Over time, you start associating compliance with reward, which makes it easier for them to keep you under their influence. The danger is, it can feel so good in the moment that you don't notice how it's shaping your behavior long-term. They reward behaviors that benefit them, training you to keep doing them without even realizing it. Gaslighting. This is one of the most insidious manipulation tactics out there. It's about making you doubt your own reality. The manipulator will deny things they've said or done, twist past events, or claim you're imagining things. Over time, you start questioning your own memory, judgment, and even sanity. The name comes from the old play Gaslight, where a husband dimmed the lights and insisted nothing had changed, driving his wife to doubt herself. The goal is the same now, to make you so unsure of your perception that you depend entirely on theirs. They twist facts, deny events, and make you question your memory until you start doubting your own reality, making you dependent on theirs. The long con. This isn't a quick manipulation. It's a slow, calculated scheme. The manipulator plays the long game, building trust over weeks, months, or even years. They might pose as a friend, mentor, or romantic partner, all while setting you up for a bigger payoff later, whether it's money, influence, or control. Because they've invested so much time into earning your trust, the betrayal feels shocking when it finally happens, and by then, they've often gotten exactly what they wanted. Instead of quick wins, they slowly build trust over weeks, months, or years, waiting until you're fully invested before making their move. Covert deception. This is lying in a way that's hidden beneath layers of truth. Instead of telling an outright falsehood, the manipulator hides the lie inside mostly accurate statements, making it harder to detect. They might tell you 90% of the truth, leaving out or twisting the critical 10% that changes the whole meaning. It works because our brains are more likely to believe something if most of it sounds true. They hide lies within mostly true statements, making the deception harder to spot. Creating an illusion. This tactic is all about appearances. The manipulator creates a false sense of security, competence, or success to make you see them, or a situation, in the way they want. Think of a scammer renting a luxury car and office space for a week to convince investors they're successful, or a toxic partner acting perfect in public while being abusive in private. The illusion draws you in before you see the reality. They craft a false image of themselves, a situation, or your relationship, so you see only what they want you to see. The big build-up. This is when they shower you with praise, attention, or promises, building your expectations sky high, only to pull the rug out later. The build-up can be used to make a later demand feel more reasonable, or to create emotional whiplash when they suddenly withdraw the positivity, leaving you desperate to win it back. They shower you with praise or promises, raising your expectations, then use that goodwill to push for something, or to make you chase their approval when it's withdrawn. Putting the other person down. This is about eroding someone's confidence over time so they become easier to control. The manipulator might use insults disguised as jokes, constant criticism, or comparisons to others. Even small digs, repeated enough, can make a big impact on your self-esteem. Once you feel less capable or worthy, you're less likely to stand up to them, and more likely to accept their version of reality. They slowly chip away at your self-worth through criticism, comparisons, and jokes at your expense, making you less likely to resist their control. Leading questions. A leading question is one that's designed to steer your answer in a particular direction, often without you realizing it. Instead of asking neutrally, the manipulator will build an assumption right into the question. For example, neutral. How was the meeting? Leading. So, the meeting was a disaster, right? By framing it this way, they plant an idea in your mind and make it harder for you to disagree without sounding defensive. Over time, leading questions can shape your perceptions and decisions subtly but powerfully. Online grooming. This is manipulation in the digital age. Grooming is when someone builds a false sense of trust, comfort, and dependency over time, usually to exploit the other person later. It's not always sexual. It can be financial, emotional, or ideological. The manipulator might present themselves as a friend, mentor, or ally. Gradually share personal details to encourage you to do the same. Offer help, attention, and validation to make you feel understood. Because it happens online, it can feel safer, but that's part of the trap. They can create a carefully crafted persona without the inconsistencies that would show in person. Financial obligations. Money is one of the strongest tools of control. When someone can create a financial tie, whether through lending you money, paying for things, or making you dependent on their resources, they can use that leverage to influence your choices. This can look like offering financial help, then expecting loyalty or favors in return, guilt-tripping you about money they've spent on you, structuring situations so you're financially reliant on them. The more indebted or dependent you feel, the more power they have over you, and manipulators know this very well. Dark psychology and seduction. This is where manipulation meets attraction. Seduction in the dark psychology sense isn't just about romance. It's about drawing someone in emotionally, mentally, or even sexually for the purpose of gaining control. It uses tools we've already talked about, like love bombing, anchoring, and creating insecurity, but channels them into a charm offensive. The manipulator becomes the perfect partner or ideal friend at first, mirroring your interests, values, and desires. Once you're emotionally hooked, they slowly begin to take more than they give, using the bond they've built to extract loyalty, favors, or resources. How to use dark psychology to succeed at work. Now, here the book takes an interesting turn. It explains that dark psychology traits can be used for positive or at least neutral purposes in competitive environments. The key is intention. For example, confidence and presence, a light form of dominance, can help in leadership. Strategic communication, like anchoring positive emotions to your ideas, can make presentations more persuasive. Reading people's motives, a Machiavellian skill, can help you navigate office politics. The point isn't to manipulate coworkers for selfish gain. It's to recognize the tactics that are already in play around you, and to apply the ones that aren't harmful in order to protect yourself and advance fairly. Conclusion. The book wraps up by stressing one big idea. Awareness is the best defense. Dark psychology isn't going away. It's a natural part of human interaction. The danger comes when it's used without empathy, ethics, or care for others. By learning to spot these tactics, you can avoid being manipulated. Respond with calm and clarity when someone tries. Use persuasive skills in ways that don't harm others. The ultimate goal isn't to become a manipulator yourself. It's to become unmanipulatable. That means staying alert, emotionally grounded, and informed about how influence works. Now that you've seen how manipulators operate, you can't unsee it. The question is, will you use this knowledge to protect yourself or to understand the game they're playing? Knowledge without action changes nothing. You've just learned how dark psychology works. Now it's your turn to spot it in the wild. Every day, someone is trying to influence you without you even realizing. But now you know how to see it. Drop a comment sharing the tactic that shocked you most, and subscribe if you're ready for more powerful insights. Until next time, stay alert and think for yourself.